Hey everyone, this is Mana Redux again, and welcome back to Secret of Mana Redux. Be sure to check out our website at manaredux.com for more exciting journeys into everything Secret of Mana, like the one we'll be taking today. In this video, we'll be taking a look at the behind-the-scenes development of the Upper Land, the second major area in Secret of Mana. This area is home to some iconic locations, like Matango, the Mushroom Kingdom. No, not that one, sorry. The Sprite Village, the Moogle Village, the Wind Palace, the Dragon Cave, and of course, the Great Forest. It's here that our favorite poet Ted Woolsey taught us that if we walk the seasons from spring to winter, we can walk back to spring again, and that's when the hidden Sprite Village can be reached. Today, we're going to focus on how the map and locations of the Upper Land evolved over time. There's a lot here that you wouldn't know just from playing the game, but we got all those spicy insights to share with you today. Let's start by taking a look at a map of the Upper Land itself. You'll notice that the Great Forest is much larger than what we have on the ground, so the concept for this place is quite vast. To the north, we've got Matango, and to the south, there's the Wind Palace. The earliest pre-release map we have of Secret of Mana dates back to 1992, and it shows a very different idea for Matango compared to what we got in the final release. You can see a lot more detail here, which was gradually scaled back in later maps until it settled into its final form. There's no significant gameplay footage from promotional video sources, but a lot of the early concept for the Upper Land lives on in stills. For example, check out these solo shots of the sprite in an area that was cut near the Sprite Village. We're not sure if Papelli was being prototyped here, or if there was supposed to be an option to play characters solo like Trials of Mana later, but either way, this area didn't make it into the final game. One of the best finds, though, is this fully constructed Moogle village that's not in the release cartridge. Compare it to the mostly empty field that makes up the village on the SNES, and you'll notice a pretty big difference. This map came out after the game's release, so it could have been a very late chop, or just an idea that the developers decided not to include for gameplay reasons. Either way, it's clear the Moogle village was meant to be a bigger deal at some point. The programmer known as Tom constructed a map showing how this would have looked on the cartridge. Moving on to Matango, the concept in these stills was mostly the same as what we got, but take a look at these shots where a human NPC appears, probably a leftover from early testing. Some of these images have completely different designs than the Matango we're familiar with. Next is the Dragon Cave that has a really peculiar area that seems to serve no real purpose. If you walk over to this chasm here, you'll notice you can't reach the stairs behind it, normally anyway. It turns out the staircase was likely going to lead to this nowhere land on the next floor, which is either incomplete or meant to be a road to nowhere. By the way, you can't actually see this in normal gameplay. Back to the main floor, there's currently a dead end if you take the stairs to the east. The game's code reveals that there was probably supposed to be some kind of animation where the ground would open up and you'd fall into the chasm if you tried to access the stairs, like the Tonpole fight in the Ice Palace. Once you fell, you'd end up here and return to the upper floor using the stairs. But since the stairs would only lead to the dead end on the next floor, we can only guess whether it was meant to annoy the player or if something bigger was excised. I'm told that a lot of code was moved around in this area. As for the Wind Palace, evidence remains of grand plans for the scenario. When you enter, the heroes draw their weapons, but no monsters are around. Some think this is just an oversight by the developers that can be exploited to practice Prim's magic and boost its levels, and you can certainly do that, but it's actually a remnant of an earlier phase when monsters did indeed roam the palace. In fact, there's even a cut line of dialogue in the ROM, likely to have been spoken by Papelli's grandpa, about the Empire sending monsters into the Wind Palace. It's worth noting that the entire Wind Palace is limited to one room, in sharp contrast to the underground palace recently visited at this point. The primary map for the Wind Palace in the game's ROM is numbered 273. There's an unused door that lands you in the bottom left corner here, which in the final game is in the middle of a wall. Essentially, this map was intended to be a destination accessible from another map that no longer exists in the game, so the code for it sits unused. The map directly preceding number 273 is completely blank, though it too has an unused door pointing to it in its code. Given that it's adjacent to the other map, it's probably part of the deleted Wind Palace. This shot of Nico from Dengeki Super Famicom magazine in June of 1993 shows a palace with the same palette as the Wind Palace. And while it's not certain that this is the Wind Palace, it's possible that you would have encountered this scumbucket cat peddling his wares here too. These three maps here may look familiar. In the final game, they're part of the underground palace where you meet the gnome. However, these are numbered 269 in the ROM, very close to the Wind Palace's maps, whereas the rest of the underground palace's maps are way off elsewhere in the ROM's memory. Given their proximity to the Wind Palace's maps, these were probably part of that palace and not the underground palace originally. It kind of makes sense if you look closely and see that they look more like connectors than actual rooms. They were likely intended to be corridors between rooms of the Wind Palace, and were later adapted to flow into one another to make use of the orphan content after the Wind Palace's original concept was abandoned. I've adjusted the color palette here to show how they may have looked in the Wind Palace. There's actually an unused door that takes you here as well, and lands you in yet another wall due to things shifting around during development. All three unused doors we've mentioned are off by one in the game's code, indicating they're a lost set, almost certainly intended for the Wind Palace. Finally, each area in Secret of Mana has a set of event flags in the code, like all games, that are triggered when the player performs certain actions. When a player does things like step on a switch or talk to an NPC, the values of the flags change to let the game know that these actions have occurred. In the Wind Palace, there are small pieces of event code that react to higher flag values, including Grandpa's cut line about monsters entering the palace. Other values correspond to a seemingly complex deleted boss fight. There's actually 3 possible values depending on some state of the scrapped monster. Finally, different music plays when adjusting the Wind Palace's flags. We'll leave you with this screenshot showing Randy, Prim, and Popoe in yet another lost screen of the Upper Land. We can only wonder how the Secret of Mana experience would have been different if some of these ideas had come to fruition. To think this was all in just one area of the game. We've got more videos on the game's development, so be sure to check those out, and don't forget to follow our channel for more updates. Thanks for watching. Until next time.